everybody, I am super pumped to have John Glowa with me today and his cute little kitty cat. This is a subject that is near and dear to me. We're going to talk about the status of wolves here in the state of Maine. Those who know me know that I did my undergraduate and graduate research on the wild canids of our region. So I'm really excited to have John Glowa with us. He founded the Maine Wolf Coalition way back in 1994 when a wolf was shot and killed near Moosehead Lake in north central Maine. He has had a distinguished career. He's a Maine native, but all throughout New England, he has served in governmental roles, primarily here in the state as he retired from the role of environmental protection. So he knows what he's talking about, and he's been around the woods a while of Maine, the North Woods of Maine. Really excited to have him and to ask him some probing questions. But first, John, I'd like for you to really just tell us about yourself, and the follow-up question to introducing yourself to everyone beyond what I've just said is, tell us why wolves. So have at it. Introduce yourself and take us down that road.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate the opportunity. First thing I need to let folks know is that I'm a Maine native, seventh generation. I was born in Presque Isle. My grandfather was a potato farmer in Blaine. My grandmother was a school teacher. So my roots here in Maine, and especially Aroostook County, are very, very deep. I don't want folks to think that I'm an outsider trying to tell them what to do, because I'm certainly not an outsider, and I'm certainly not trying to tell folks what to do.
That is an
What I am
important
trying to do is simply educate folks.
Yeah, and let me just jump in there and say, hearing you say that, I understand why you want to say that. One of the biggest criticisms, of course, of organizations like Restore the Maine Woods is that they're primarily people from, Boston,
sure,
and Southern New England and all like that. And so that's one of the primary criticisms, is that their funding and their leadership are actually not in Maine. And you're saying, no, I'm leading this as a native Mainer with a passion and a heart for Maine, right?
You're looking at our office, okay? And we have basically 4 people who are volunteers, including myself, who are working on this. We're all volunteers. We do it because we feel that it's the right thing to do. Money comes out of our own pockets. And we have a fellow by the name of John Way. John is probably the foremost eastern coyote expert on the planet. He's written several books. We have Jennifer Rosato, who's a school teacher, and she takes the phenomenal videos and photographs that we were able to post. And we have a young lady by the name of Maeve Rogers, who is working out in Minnesota with the Voyagers Wolf Project. So I think we have some pretty good talent on our team, and I think it shows in our results.
Yeah, I know John Way pretty well. When this was probably 15 years ago, when I was finishing my undergraduate program and needed to do my undergraduate thesis. I decided to, the genetics were being done already. The hybridization between wolves and coyotes had already been established. So John and I talked at length about something that I could do that would be meaningful. So what I did was a morphometric survey, basically, looking at when you have a litter of puppies, from 2 different breeds, one of them looks like dad and one of them looks like mom. But after a while, if you keep that cross going, there's a balance that eventually takes place. So my question for my study was, what is this balance? That has, what do we see in the coy wolf, the Canis latrans variant? What do we see as having happened morphologically, physiologically, and what does that tell us about what the role they're playing in the environment? So yeah, I'm very familiar with John's work.
So our folks can understand what you did. Can you please explain morphometrics and morphology?
Yeah. So morphology is basically you're looking at the pelage, the color of the coats. You're looking at the size. You're looking at the shape. Not only mass, but where they are larger than a traditional coyote, where they are, where they fall within the parameters of a traditional coyote, and what those measurements tell us about the role that they're playing in the environment. So yeah, and I don't know that John followed up with me after that research, but it was a great opportunity for me to do something that was different, and then I carried that research on when I went to Antioch. But I didn't mean to interrupt. I want you to
Nope,
continue telling
it's
us
good.
why you're doing what you're doing, and we can
Yep,
get into all of
yep.
that.
I need to let folks know that I am not anti-hunting. I'm a non-hunter. I choose not to hunt. I used to be a fisherman, but to be honest with you, I really have, since my boys have grown up, I really have lost too much interest in fishing. But I don't begrudge people who want to fish. I don't begrudge people who want to hunt for the right reasons. And when I say the right reasons, I mean fair chase hunting, hunting for food, hunting for sport, hunting for trophies, hunting just for fun, the fun of it. I disagree with, and I strongly oppose. So, am I anti-hunting? Absolutely not. Am I against killing for fun? I absolutely am. I also want to point out too that there's been a 30-year misconception that I support reintroducing wolves to Maine. I and the Maine Wolf Coalition have always opposed reintroducing wolves, and the reason for that is because there's no need to do that. And our goal is to simply let nature take its course. We want to allow wolves in Canada to survive. We want to allow wolves in the Northeast U.S. to survive, and they are, in the Northeast U.S., they are protected under federal law, under the Endangered Species Act. Unfortunately, the federal government does not enforce that here in the Northeast, and the state governments don't want wolves. So the wolves have a pretty tough time by encouraging the killing of so-called coyotes. The governments are also encouraging the killing of wolves. And a real controversial statement that I'll make is there are no coyotes in Maine. There are no coyotes in the entire Northeast. All of these animals, every single animal, it's either a coyote wolf hybrid, and some of them are wolves. There are no pure coyotes in the Northeast, and people who claim that these animals are coyotes claim that they've killed many so they know what they look like. Well, anybody who's only hunted in Maine or who's only hunted coyotes in the Northeast knows what these animals look like, but these animals aren't coyotes. So
Yeah.
that's I think an important point that
It
distinction
is,
needs
and
to be made.
I'm glad that you went ahead and threw that out there, because it was something that I was going to ask you about, because I've seen you make that statement publicly before. There are no coyotes in Maine, and while the coy wolf population here doesn't, I think, have an they didn't 15 years ago have an official designation as its own species, yet it was moving dramatically in that direction even 15 years ago, with the variant edition. And so what I want to do just for a second, and then I want you to jump in and add to it or correct anything that you see that I'm off on here.
Sure.
Basically, the backstory for our listeners, for people who want to bring themselves up to speed on Maine, is when Europeans came to North America, they brought with them their cultural detestation of wild canids, specifically wolves, and extirpated wolves moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. Coyotes, being the wily, brilliant animals that they are, saw the vacuums that were being created, the gaps in the ecology that was being created throughout the east, and so they start backfilling. They start moving from west, where coyotes are native, and start moving east. The coyotes that we have specifically here in New England most likely came to us north of the Great Lakes through the Algonquin National Park region, and what I would always explain to people is gray wolves are old world wolves, but the eastern timber wolf is a new world wolf. And where gray wolves and coyotes overlap, there's war, and wolves are always, the gray wolves are always trying to kill them, or boot them out of their territory. But when the new world coyote and the new world eastern timber wolf came into contact with each other, hybridization occurred. And so, to John's point, he's absolutely right. What we have here is something at least new for us. This may have happened before, before human history here, but two New World canids, the eastern timber wolf and the coyote hybridized. And so what we have here in northern Maine is something truly unique. Would you agree with that overview?
Well, I'd say for the most part, I mean, this hybridization has also occurred in the Great Lakes and New York, parts of Ohio, farther south, southeast. It's safe to say in the eastern U.S. and certainly in the Northeast, Newfoundland, Labrador, New Brunswick, etc. It's the same animal, and it's a coyote wolf hybrid, varying degrees of wolf and coyote DNA in the animal. I would point out too that it's important to note that people who claim that geez, wolves are much bigger than coyotes, you'd be able to tell the difference, blah 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 blah. Eastern wolf females average about 45 to 55 pounds. Eastern wolf males average about 60 to 65 pounds. That's about the same size as the wolves that live in the upper Great Lakes in northern Minnesota. So a large coyote wolf hybrid is virtually the same size as an average or smaller eastern wolf. And that's one of the reasons why steps should be taken to regulate the killing of these coyote wolf hybrids, because it's virtually impossible to distinguish them from
Yeah.
wolves. Your chances of seeing a 90 or 100-pound wolf in the woods are very, very, very slim. Your chances of seeing a 45 to 65-pound eastern wolf, I would say, are certainly there. And the reason I say that is because eastern wolves live only within 60 miles of New York and 75 miles of Maine. An animal can cover that distance in 1 to 2 days. So it's no huge problem for wolves to cross the St. Lawrence River and come into to New York and come into the rest of New England. So
What
the size differential there is basically false. People's assumptions
Yeah,
are
and
false.
there's so many things that you're triggering in my mind that I want to talk with you about and ask you about, that
Let's go for
that
it.
I,
Let's
I
go
can't
for it.
keep it, I can't keep up. But one,
This is, as you know, this is a
yeah,
hugely complex
it
issue.
is. And usually it is the people who refuse to commit the time and thought to any issue, be it ecological, political, religious, whatever. It's those people who usually are the most staunchly entrenched in their position because they haven't really exposed them. So, not to get off on
This
that
is an
not to get
opportunity.
off on that tangent. One thing that I had to do when I was doing my presentations, um, at university, was I had to show people, like, this is a southwestern coyote. This is
Right?
the canid that lives in the Northeast. This is the Canis latrans variant, the hybrid that lives in the Laurentian Hills ecoregion, and show them pictures back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then start giving the stats on the size. The average, I think, the average in the 26 um, wild canids in my study, the average, I think, and it's been a long time since it's been about 15 years, but the average was about 40 to 45
Mm,
pounds.
yeah.
And I had 40 to 42 pounds, I think, but I had a couple that were 48-pound males.
Sure.
And that was not uncommon. And I was hearing, and I wish I could have included them in my study, some that were even much larger. You know, if you put a southwestern coyote next to a Maine, putting in air quotes, coyote,
Right.
you would know immediately, that these are two very different animals, and the role that they're playing in the ecology of the region is very different as well.
Yeah.
Would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to add that for the sake of simplicity, let's call these Maine canids coyotes. Is that okay?
It's going to make things easier for me.
Okay, sure. So for the sake of simplicity, these Maine coyotes and eastern wolves are very, very, very similar with their diet habits because eastern wolves aren't that much bigger than the coyotes we have here. Eastern wolves probably prey on deer a little bit more. Typically, they're not big enough to take down moose. Very rarely they're able to take down a moose, but that's very, very rare. I would say that both of these animals are not carnivores. They're both omnivores, and they're opportunists. And by omnivores, I mean they eat plant material and they eat animals. They will eat live animals. They will eat dead animals. They will kill animals. They will eat blueberries. They will eat raspberries. They will eat whatever they need to eat to stay alive. Summertime is really, really tough on these animals because the deer fawns can outrun them. And a lot of the animals, birds and stuff can fly away. And they have a really hard time finding food. So you'll find scat out in the woods. It's full of berries. It'd be canid scat, full of berries because that's what they're eating.
Yeah.
Um,
I was,
so
I,
so their diets are very, very, very similar. They'll both eat meat and they'll both eat berries and things like that.
yeah, I, and I'll go ahead and share this with you. I know I told you I would send this to you and I didn't get the opportunity. But the results of my research actually brought out some of what you're saying right now. Although I did morphometrics on every part of the body, it was the dentition that gave us the biggest aha moments. The teeth, the Swiss Army knife, if you would, of the local canids was the biggest
Mm.
aha moment for our research. Um, we measured the sagittal crest and compared it to Eastern timber wolf. By we, I mean me, and with the coyotes, the
Hmm. Hmm.
zygomatic arch. I mean everything, and what I came down to, the it was interesting, and this is really interesting, and so you can only draw inferences from what I'm about to say. I know that this is not conclusive, but this is my conviction based on what I saw. The canines on any canid is the killing tooth. It's the saber. It's the killer. And what was interesting in the study was that although our local coyotes are significantly larger than traditional coyotes, their canine teeth, their killing teeth, were not significantly larger. They were on the upper end of the coyote spectrum for a killing apparatus,
Hmm.
but they were
Hmm.
not outside of the pale of coyote. But what was off the charts, um, of coyote and well within wolf eastern timber wolf parameters, and this was really surprising to me, so much so that it was crowding the other teeth in the mouth, were the carnassials, the big bone crushers and
Oh, sure,
and
sure.
and meat hackers in the back of the mouth. And so what that suggested to me and suggested to my professors, and I know this isn't conclusive, this is just my conviction based on it, is that they're not necessarily killing larger prey in the Northeast than coyotes are elsewhere, but they are consuming larger prey than they are.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is scavenging. If you think about a gut shot moose or a gut shot deer that runs off into the woods and dies somewhere, or
A roadkill.
a roadkill, a car hits something, it
Yeah.
goes off in the wintertime, the only competition they have, the black bear, is sleeping, And so they are serving this job of, and I saw it firsthand because I was glad to hear you say you're not opposed to hunting completely. And I want to circle back to that. But I did some trapping for this morphometric study. And what I saw, I had a local farmer bring out, I have 50 acres here now. Then I had 30 acres, but I had a local farmer bring out a lot of his carcasses from his cattle and just dump them. And this was in the middle of winter. And what they would do is they would just set up shop on the carcass. You know, they would eat until they couldn't eat anymore, go sit in the shade, digest the food, watch the carcass, and make sure, to run any other scavengers off away that came to get it. And so they were just a meat processing plant, scavenging on, definitely scavenging on larger bones, scavenging on larger meat, but not necessarily killing larger prey. And
No.
what further supported that to me is that I've seen lots of videos from friends of mine in the Allagash that are guides of coyotes playing with deer. And,
Hmm.
and so what I gather from that is, yes, opportunistic hunters and opportunistic feeders. And these guys, every time, let me say this. Was it 2008, 2009, we had a very severe winter. And that was about the time that I had a debate with the leader of a local coyote extermination organization um, that calls itself a conservation organization. I had a debate with them about the perceived value of trying to manage game species by controlling predator numbers and why that doesn't work, and trying to have that conversation with them. But what happens is everyone's like, oh, you can't tell me because I saw a deer's carcass hanging from a tree branch and completely devoured. And I'm like, you know what? Coyotes don't climb trees. So let me tell you what happened. The snow depth was so high that that's
Mm.
where it was because
Hmm.
we pick the species that we like. White-tailed deer are not indigenous to northern Maine, but it's a desirable game species, so we want to manage for them. They are just as invasive as the Maine coyote is, but we don't like the coyote and we like the deer, so we're going to pick sides or whatever. But if I were a coyote and there's 6 feet of snow on the ground and deer are up to their necks because they're not physiologically adapted to living here, they're up to their necks, they're starving to death, they can't move around very well, they're freezing to death. Is a coyote going to take advantage of that? Darn Skippy is going to take advantage of that. And I don't blame him. But that is the symptom. The real problem is that when we have those 1 out of 10 year winters here, white-tailed deer, Virginianus is in their name for a reason. They're just not adapted to really deal with it that well.
I'm taking notes um, because you're giving a ton of really good information. Um, I want to go back to you talking about playing with deer. My guess is they may be actually be testing those deer.
Absolutely.
They're looking for any kind of a weakness, I would say.
Absolutely.
One of the things that affects deer in growing parts of the country is what's called chronic wasting disease, and it's always fatal. And it hasn't been found in Maine yet, but that doesn't mean it isn't here. Um, One role that these coyotes and wolves can play is to catch and kill deer that have chronic wasting disease to help minimize its spread. And as far as coyotes or wolves killing everything, and I mean that's what we hear. Based on science. Now, I'm all for science. Um, Unfortunately, the wolf issue is 99% politics and 1%
Mm-hmm.
science, and so that's something that we're up against. But even in places like Minnesota, wolves are only successful, I believe, once in every 10
Mm-hmm.
attempts of to catch a deer. Most of these animals are too fast for them. They can outrun them. They can outsmart them. They're lucky, whatever. And as far as wolf numbers go, and even coyote numbers, they're self-regulating. People don't have to kill them to control the population. What controls the population, number one, is the number of prey available. And number two, they control their own populations. They're what's called self-regulating.
Mm-hmm.
The number one natural cause of wolf mortality is a wolf. Wolves will kill wolves that come into their territory. They'll kill whatever. Um, they'll kill other wolves. It's called intra-specific strife. So they regulate their own populations. They establish territories, which they pretty much stick to, and essentially they mind their own business. And the size of the territory, the number of wolves is determined by the availability of prey. If there is a lot of prey, you will have more wolves and you will have smaller territories. If the prey is few and far between, you'll have less wolves and they'll have much, much, much larger territories. So the fallacy that we need to control these animals simply isn't true. And those folks who believe in science should understand and accept that they don't need to go out there and kill these animals. Yeah. Another point that needs to be made when you talk about science, there is no science whatsoever to show that killing coyotes benefits the deer population, increases deer numbers, or really has any effect whatsoever on deer numbers. What it does do is it allows deer that are sick, that are unfit, whatever, to survive, because these coyotes and wolves would normally cull these sick animals. So the when we say we want to let nature take its course, that's what we mean. Allow the predators to do their job, and if they've coexisted for over 10,000 years, and wolves didn't wipe out deer or moose or caribou. Who did? We did.
Right.
So,
We see the same thing with here in northern Maine, the northern goshawk and the Canada lynx. What happens is their primary prey is the snowshoe hare, and the snowshoe hare has I think it's a 7 to 8 year boom bust
bust,
cycle,
right?
and it's not the predators that are causing the bust. It's they themselves who have overgrazed their habitat, and so then
Yep.
their numbers start to come down. And what we discover is that, as you just said, the predator numbers follow in the charts, follow the
Right.
prey numbers up, and then follow the prey numbers back down, and then follow the prey numbers up, and follow the prey numbers back down, not the other way around. And I will add to what you just said, and all of that was absolutely accurate about predator control being futile. Not only does it not, there's no evidence to show that it helps deer populations. There is evidence, as you said, that it allows substandard, deer to continue
Sure.
passing on their genes instead of the healthier ones to do so. But also, there's actually some evidence to suggest that predator control tournaments can actually increase the number of coyotes in the region. And boy, try explaining that to someone. And I'm going to try to explain it just really briefly here and then let you jump in. But what I try to explain to people is even with our coy wolves, they're not as wolf-like in their behavior, but they're not as coyote-like either. They have family units, and their yearlings stick around sometimes 2 years, sometimes 3 years. It's not as tight knit as a wolf pack, but it's definitely not as loose as a coyote one. And what I tell people is the alpha pair ensures that those juveniles are not breeding. This is their territory. And when a hunter kills that alpha pair, now it's just like a whole bunch of teenage kids whose sexual hormones are going crazy with no parental supervision. What's going to happen? They're all going to be breeding, and you're going to have You're going to have cubs
Two or
everywhere.
three, 2 or 3 litters where otherwise you might have only one litter. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And try to, some folks pick and choose the science they want to believe. That's the science, folks. And if we can get more folks to understand that, instead of just hating these animals, or going out and killing for fun, or going out because they think that they're doing a service. They're not. They're doing exactly the opposite of what they think they're doing. So if we can, educate even one person,
And
get them to
I'll
stop killing these animals, we've succeeded, I think.
I'll go a step further. I'll go a step further and say that we you can ask a hunter, and a hunter will tell you he loves white-tailed deer. The white-tailed deer hunter will say, I love
Mhm.
white-tailed deer. I respect that animal. I want to hunt that animal and I reverence it. I remember the first time that I harvested a white-tailed deer. There was just such an emotion that came over me that I, it was almost instinct. I couldn't help myself. I immediately just put my hand on the animal and thanked God for, that contribution to my family. So like, I felt that, and so hunters say they feel that so often. And what I tell them is, why do you feel like you have to hate the coyote? Why do you feel like you have to have this visceral hatred? It's another animal to be respected. It's another animal to be reverenced, just like all of the other animals out there. But for some reason, they have this mentality of, oh, fair chase when it comes to the white-tailed deer, but extermination when it comes to the coy wolf. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And people have been brainwashed, and they've been brainwashed by people who outdoor writers, frankly. They've been brainwashed by Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and you know, by each other. And I don't know how we get past that. The fact of the matter is, the weakest link in the chain is not coyotes, and it's not hunters. It's winter. A bad winter will kill up to a third of Maine's deer population, which last I knew was over 300,000 animals. So a bad winter will kill 100,000 or more deer. Means coyotes and wolves would kill a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that. And I forgot my other
No,
point, but
that's great. That's
but
awesome. And
it's the winter,
yes,
and it's not predators, and frankly, it's not hunters.
yeah, the predators are a symptom of the problem. They're not the core problem. I agree with you 100%. I also spent 2 years studying white-tailed deer winter survivability, and up here in northern Maine, we have all of these deer wintering yards that we've set aside and conserved so the deer can survive the winter. And we put tracking collars on these deer, and some of them are traveling 20 and 30 miles, but they're not going to those wintering yards. They're going right.
That's exactly
They're going.
that's exactly they're going to the food.
They're,
That's exactly right.
they're going to the communities.
They're going right into
They're
town.
going right into town where people are going to feed them because they're not physiologically adapted to be here. We love them. We want them here. That's fine. We paid a price for them establishing themselves here. They are the reason why the caribou, the woodland caribou reintroduction didn't work, because they're immune to parasites that the woodland caribou aren't immune to, and so the overlap wiped them out. Yeah, so I want to circle back to what you were saying about the hunting, and the brainwashing. I I think a great place for us to start, because this just makes sense for everyone, is you know if you want to hunt, sure, we've got plenty of coyotes. If you want to hunt them and you want to have the hunting season, let's have that hunting season. But to have it 365 days a year, day and night, when a mother has her cubs in the den, and you're killing this mother when she has cubs in the den that she's trying to care for, I think that crosses the line. And I think anyone with any reason would see that as unethical. And I think that would be a great place for us to start in in the defense of ethical hunting of these coyotes. The other thing that really bothered me, John, is when I started doing this research. I'm not opposed to hunting coyotes. I'm not opposed to trapping them. But in these predator control tournaments, guys would show up with 20, 30 coyotes in the back of their truck, and are they taking the fur? Nope. Are they harvesting and tanning the fur and processing it and selling it? Nope. You're talking about hundreds of coyotes just getting dumped in a ditch, because I think some of them actually believe that they're doing a service, but a lot of them just, some of them just, they just want to kill something. And, so I think there's a balance. I think predators can be hunted, and I think there needs to be a purpose for it. This is just me, and I want your opinion on this. There needs to be a purpose for it. You're harvesting their fur. You're gonna bring their fur to market, that kind of thing. But doing that when you're going to have 3 to 5 cubs starving to death because you killed its parent, I don't know how in any world someone can see that as fair chase and ethical hunting.
Okay. A lot there. And I took some more notes. The state of Maine has what's called the Coyote Control Program. And you can sign up, and the state will pay you for your time. You don't even have to kill coyotes. The state will pay you for your time and or mileage. And over the years, this program, the average paid per dead coyote is between $150 and $200 per animal, with absolutely zero proven benefit to the deer herd. This is was a political established for political
This is
reasons.
news to me, John. I didn't know this. I knew that there were bounties in the West that didn't work, but I didn't know there was a bounty here in the state. I didn't know that.
Well, it effectively is a bounty. It's just not called one. You can get the list of people who are in the program from Fish and Wildlife. They have a printout. You can see how much each one was paid. You can see how many animals each one was killed. Each person killed. Some of them killed no animals and were paid hundreds of dollars for their time because they made the effort. It makes no sense at all. Again, when I say this issue is 99% politics, 1% science, there's absolutely no science behind that program. It's all politics. And as far as ethics go, um, the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife has a statutory mission. The word ethics is nowhere in that mission. They are not required to mention ethics, to practice ethics, to promote ethics, to teach ethics. And I think that's a problem. I think that, and I think hunters should be required in some way to do ethical hunting. But the system as it is in my opinion, very broken. And we have laws that aren't enforced. We have some really bad laws on the books, and I think one of them is this IFW's mission. Where not only that are they not required to consider ethics in their policy making and decision making, they're not even required to consider science. Science is not in their mission.
Yeah.
So, so I think the system was set up in my opinion, to benefit hunters, to benefit people who want to kill things, and it certainly wasn't set up to benefit the animals.
Mm-hmm.
If you take care of the wildlife first, the rest will all follow. If you put the animals first and their welfare first, there will be plenty of animals out there to hunt. So I think that the system is kind of upside down in that respect,
Yeah.
and I think it should be changed.
Can you
But
tell Can you tell our listeners and our viewers? I know you talked about 1994, the
yeah,
wolf that was killed, and we've already established that our coyotes here are um, our coy wolves. Um,
Yeah,
can you tell us what the history has been of the northeastern, the timber wolves' attempts to reintroduce themselves to Maine?
sure. Yeah. To go back to the beginning, though, why do I do this? Um, when I was a teenager, I watched a TV show called The Wolfmen. And I was a teenager at about 18, 12, I think it was, something like that. That's a joke. You're supposed to smile. Um, it was about 1970. And I saw them shooting wolves in Alaska from airplanes. And that memory really stuck with me. And in 1993, it was a bear hunter killed a wolf in Maine. And for me, it was just like I had a smoldering. There was a little fire smoldering inside me, and then that was like throwing gasoline on that fire. And I just wanted to learn as much as I possibly could to try and understand what was happening, to understand what the state was doing or not doing. And at that time, I was in graduate school, and I did a project on the wolf issue in Maine. And I went to Fish and Wildlife, and I talked with a biologist, and I said, "So now that we have a dead wolf, what's Fish and Wildlife going to do about the situation to educate the public about it?" And he said, "It's not our job to educate the public. It's the public's job to educate themselves." So that's why we founded the Maine Wolf Coalition, to try and gather the information, get the evidence, get the facts, and get that information to the public so the public can be informed and make up their own minds, make their own decisions in terms of what they want and what they don't want, how they want to deal with it. So that's really why we started in the first place, and that's why we're still here, because there's an awful lot that needs to be, that is known, and a lot of information that people need to know. And so we just try to disseminate that information as best we can. Now, as far as the history of wolves here, um, as I said earlier, Maine is 75 miles from Wolf Range in Quebec. New York is 60 miles from Wolf Range in Quebec. The closest wolf here would be the eastern wolf, and there's a population of eastern wolves across southern Ontario and Quebec. These are the smaller animals. They can travel over 1,000 miles during dispersal. They're just like humans in that, when you grow up, you get to be a certain age, you get a little, you want to head out on your own. Well, wolves do the same thing. They want to head out on their own. They'll travel hundreds or maybe even 1,000 miles to look for a mate, to look for their own territory. They can and do cross the St. Lawrence River. It's false to assume that they can't, because that's how our coyotes got here. They crossed the St. Lawrence River. So if they can do it, if lynx can do it, if moose can do it, if fishers can do it, certainly wolves can do it. So we had this wolf killed in 1993. In 1996, we had another one killed in Maine. And later on in succeeding years, we've had wolves killed in New York State, the most recent in 2021. And that animal was not an eastern wolf. That animal was a Great Lakes gray wolf, and that was animal weighed over 80 pounds. We've had wolves killed in Massachusetts, Vermont, New Brunswick, and southern Quebec, south of the St. Lawrence River. So wolves are certainly trying to come back. They're trying to recolonize this region. This region has tens of thousands of square miles of potentially suitable wolf habitat. It has abundant prey, and all we have to do basically is let wolves survive.
Yeah,
It's not that complicated, and it shouldn't be that controversial. It's just basically to stop killing them, or certainly decrease the killing. And as I said earlier too, the state and federal governments encourage people to kill wolves by encouraging people to kill coyotes and or looking the other way. So we've got to have the government do its job.
I think you and I
Simple
both
as that.
know, like you said, a lot of it comes down to politics, and the politics come down to money. If they acknowledge that wolves are here, then they have to spend the money to manage, and because wolves are endangered, if they acknowledge that there are wolves here, they have to then they have to manage and work toward improving their numbers, which is something that they don't want to do. So what they do is they redefine that, don't they? They say what they redefine it and say what we mean by wolves. There are no wolves in Maine is there are no breeding populations of wolves in Maine. I think that's usually the standard.
It's a misnomer to think that the department would have to manage wolves if they were here. There are many, 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 many species that they don't manage, that they know are here. They certainly would not have to manage wolves if they were here. The issue is simply um, saying that, well, we don't have evidence that they're here. We don't have evidence of a breeding population. That's really easy to say when you're not looking for them.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've got a friend here in northern Maine who's an avid hunter, very good man, great family. And when I brought this subject up on social media recently, it caught him off guard because he really felt like that his actions of, trying to cut down the numbers of coyotes was helping the wildlife. And so I really do think that there are a lot of people out there that mean well, John, that just are misinformed.
yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think there certainly are some of those folks who are trying to do the right thing, but coyotes are really, really important to the ecosystem. They've come in after the wolves were exterminated. They do things like they, catch and kill rats, mice, other animals, and they play an important role. The thing about the notion of coyote control um, is impossible. There's no such thing as coyote control. Um, you can kill them till the cows come home, and they're still going to be here. It's been tried here, across the U.S. for decades, and there are more coyotes than ever. So to think that you're going to limit or control the number of coyotes here in Maine, it's an impossibility. So there have been about 10 to 15,000 coyotes here in the state for decades, and that's essentially the maximum number the
The
state can
carrying
hold.
capacity.
The carrying capacity of the available habitat and food, about 10 to 15,000 animals. So you can kill two or three or four or 5,000 a year. Within a year or two, there's going to be 10 to 15,000 more coyotes again. So why bother? Why kill them? It just really doesn't. There's no science behind it. There's really no benefit
Yeah, you're
for
right. The
anything.
science has shown consistently because predator control was very, 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 it got a lot of money thrown at it in the Western United States for decades. And the evidence resounding is it just doesn't work. It's a waste of money. We can argue whether or not whether hunting predators is a good thing to do, and I believe it has its place, but not as a means of game management in any way, shape, or form. You were going to bring up something yesterday um, when we got cut off by the thunderstorm, and it was something I had in my notes that I wanted to ask you about. You guys have been doing genetic studies on the scat of the canids of Maine. And I'd love for you to share. I know what it was 15 years ago, and I was really invested in all of this, but I would love to hear what you're seeing now and what's going on with the population.
Yeah, since 2019, we've been actively looking out for wolf poop, and we've been looking from the Maine-New Hampshire border all the way up to Escort, which is as far north as you can get in the state. And we've gotten about a little over 250 scats so far. Um, One important thing that I hear very frequently on my Facebook page is, "Where's the science? Where's the science? Where's the science?" And here's the science. Um, 2019, we collected a bunch of scats and we sent them to Trent University in Ontario for analysis. And of the 7 scats that they were able to analyze, one of those turned out to be an eastern wolf. It was about 85%. eastern wolf. The rest was coyote for the most part. And 85% eastern wolf is a very, very high percentage eastern wolf. And the reason I say that is because as coyotes move from west to east across the Great Lakes, some of them bred with eastern wolves. So the eastern wolves, even in Ontario and southern Quebec, most, if not all of them, do have coyote genes in them. So the so-called pure eastern wolf probably no longer exists. But for all practical purposes, the animal, the size of the animal, the way the animal looks, its morphometrics, its behavior, the animal is a wolf. So to find 1 out of 7 that we collected that was analyzed to be a wolf is extremely significant. And also to find an animal here in Maine that was 85% wolf is extremely surprising, very significant. And right now we have a couple hundred scats awaiting analysis, and we're hopeful that a significant percentage of those animals will turn out to be wolves. So when folks say, where's the science? Where's the science? Where's the proof of a wolf? Blah, 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 blah. We hear that all the time. We've already collected proof of a wolf, and where there's one, there's bound to be more. So stay tuned
Yeah.
for that, because exciting and interesting things are happening on the wolf front. At least if you're a wolf advocate, it's
Yeah.
exciting. If you don't want wolves, well, hopefully you'll come to understand that they belong here.
Yeah. I think I'm putting myself into the mindset of the hunters because, like you, I used to hunt. I don't hunt much anymore. And mostly it's because the last 25 years of my life I've dedicated to dog sledding, and fall hunting season for whitetail deer is the same time of year that you really need to be focusing on conditioning your dog team and building up their endurance. So something had to give. So the hunting went by the wayside. But I'm putting myself in the mindset of a hunter here, and I think their fear is, um, and this message really needs to get out. It's something that it's new to me that I'm hearing you say, that I think people need to understand, and it's worth circling back to. Um, you're not proposing wolf reintroduction. You're proposing allowing the wolves to do what they're wanting to do and fill the ecological niche that needs to be filled here in the state. And the hunter thinks in his mind, he's thinking Yellowstone, he's thinking all of these other regions where wolves have been reintroduced, and they're thinking, well, uh, if this happens, the coyote hunting is going to be completely shut down because it's an endangered species. The wolves are an endangered species, and then they're going to get protected. Um, I, that's not what I'm hearing you say. I'm hearing you say let nature balance itself out. That you're not necessarily opposed to hunting. I think we're both opposed to this notion of hunting as a means of managing wildlife populations. But so, do you have anything you want to add to that thought?
Well, there's essentially a couple of reasons why people would want to kill coyotes, and one of them is they're trying to help deer. But another reason is they just like to do it for fun. It's recreation for them, something for them to do in the wintertime. And as I said in the very beginning, I do not support killing just for fun. So I will say that it is entirely possible that coyote killing in Maine may have to be limited in order to protect wolves. And the reason for that is because you can't tell the difference between a large coyote and a small wolf. So it's the federal government's job, their responsibility, their legal responsibility to recover wolves in the United States. And as much as they continue to fight that responsibility or ignore it, every time they do, there's a lawsuit. They're sued, they're taken to court, and they always lose. They lost again recently, and that's why They are now working on developing a national gray wolf recovery plan, not because they want to, but because they have to. So all the federal government is doing its job. Wolves are protected under the Endangered Species Act. Plain and simple. It's illegal to kill them. It's illegal to harm them, molest them. The sooner the folks realize that, the easier it'll be, I think, for everybody. Because if it means that you can no longer shoot or trap coyotes in a certain area, then that's the way it will have to be. At least until wolf populations have recovered. Once the population's recovered, right now there's sport hunting for wolves in several states in the western U.S. because populations have recovered to the satisfaction of the states and the federal
That's a
government.
great point, and I'm glad you brought that up. You know, the science that we keep coming back to is that the prey species have become healthier since the wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone. The predator populations, I mean, I know a lot of hunters, and I know these hunters would love to be able to hunt eastern timber wolf one day. And I do think, to have them reestablished to the point to where a limited hunting season would be available, that's something that the hunting community really needs to think about. But just playing the devil's advocate here, I'm going to circle back and because earlier in this conversation I said the government doesn't want to acknowledge that they're here, because if they acknowledge they're here, then they have to spend funds to manage them, and they have to protect them, which they don't want to do. They want to spend that money on um, bolstering the prey populations. Um, so, I mean, are you agreeing that if they acknowledge that there is a population of them here, that they will have to financially invest in managing them and protecting them, or do you feel, because I agree with you that they don't have to, because the wolves are doing it on their own, but to your point that you just made, it is their duty federally under the Endangered Species Act to protect them if they acknowledge that they're here, right?
Um, it's the federal government's job to do that because wolves are under the jurisdiction of the federal government. They're not under the jurisdiction of the state governments right now, except for a few states in the West, like Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, where wolf populations have recovered. Now, when wolf populations recover here in Maine, the jurisdiction will revert back to the state, and then the state will manage them however they see fit, within subject to approval of the federal government. Now, if let's say we get a population of 500 wolves, federal government says they're delisted, they're okay, they go regulation of these animals goes back to the state. The state can now say, well, we'd like to have a hunting season on them, maybe kill 50 wolves a year, something like that. That's subject to federal approval. If the federal government says, sure, it's okay to do that, then that will happen. Then that can happen. Um, the state of Maine in the Northeast can accommodate hundreds of wolves because of the huge amount of wolf range and potential wolf range and the availability of food. So to think that potentially someday there may be 500 wolves in Maine is not out of the realm of possibility. I can assure you that I will be long dead and I'm not going to have to worry about it. But what I'm trying to do while I'm still here is to educate the public, to let them, help them understand the importance of these animals, to help restore the ecosystem as much as we can, restore the natural balances between predator and prey, and hopefully people will learn to live with these animals, learn to accept them, because all they are is just animals. That's all they are. They're not much larger than the coyotes that we have here, and they would do just fine if we just let them.
I have about three thoughts, and I know I'm gonna forget two of them when I say one of them. Um,
That's why you're supposed to take notes.
here's here's a thought that I've had. Well, let me deal with the other ones first. Um, you said you wanted some tough questions and some pushback, and I appreciate you saying that. So I do agree with the two categories that you gave of people who are hunting and trapping coyotes, but I do believe that there is a third category. As someone who spends, I was in Alaska training and racing sled dogs last year. I spend a lot of time outdoors in the dead of winter. Um, I mean, like when everyone else is sleeping and it's, 10, 20 below zero, I'm spending 8 to 10 hours out on the trail with the dogs at a time. And, you get really cold. And one thing that people who spend that kind of time in the cold knows is that no man-made materials can replace the quality and warmth of fur. And so I do believe there is a third category, and I believe that there is an ethical, for those who believe in hunting. And I know that there will be a lot of people from your camp that don't agree with hunting at all, but I do believe that there is a third category. There's those who do it for fun. There's those who do it because they believe they're helping the deer population, but there is that third traditional category of trappers, furriers who are like serious about their craft, serious about their art, who are going out there and respecting the animal that they're harvesting by not throwing it in a ditch or a dumpster somewhere, but actually processing that fur and using it. And I know you probably have a thought on that before I move to those two other points, so I'll let you respond. Yeah,
Sure. This is probably where we're going to have to agree to
yeah,
disagree. I will say that personally, I oppose all trapping. Simple. I think it's a cruel and inhumane way to kill, and I honestly believe that you may very well be right that there are no man-made substitutes for natural fur. But my own bias is that I don't see any reason to kill these animals, and it's just, in my opinion, not necessary. And I will say that I think time is on the animal's side because the number of trappers continues to
sure.
decline and decline and decline and
It's a
decline.
very
And in my
labor it's a
opinion,
very labor intensive skill. It requires a lot of work, and that's why
yeah,
I think that those who do it aren't doing it because they love killing things. Those who do it are doing it because a large number of them because and I'm not talking about just people who are targeting coyotes. I'm talking about beaver and things of that nature. And the conservationist in me would love to agree with you, and I probably did agree with you back 20 years ago when I was going out for an hour or two with my sled dog team. But any in long distance or endurance musher and anyone in the Arctic will tell you that there's just nothing that's been created yet by mankind that can insulate and keep someone warm like fur does. And like you said, well, we might just have to agree to disagree on that. But um, I did want to ask you this. Here's a thought that I had when I was doing my undergraduate and graduate work on the canids here on the East Coast and looking at old world canids versus new world canids. As you know, you had the red wolves in the South that are new world wolves. You had the eastern timber wolves that are new world wolves. You had the coyotes that were new world canids. And the same hybridization that took place in the Algonquin region also took place, as you have already pointed out, took place with the red wolves in the South. I'm wondering, this is just a hypothetical question that, someone who's devoted their time to this, like you have, um, probably one of the few people who would actually be able to give some meaningful feedback, you and maybe John Way, on this. My theory has been that the eastern timber wolf in the north and the red wolf in the south at one point were a continuous body where they were more red wolf in the south, they were more eastern, just like we're seeing with the hybridization now, that because they were new world wolves, that they were more eastern timber wolf, more thick coated, more rugged in the north. But the further south you went along the Appalachian Mountains, the more red wolf they became.
Mhm.
And if that
Mhm.
theory is true, what would that tell us about the type of wolf that should be here? Because I've thought about, genetic health and things like that. And I know the red wolf population in the South, no one wants them. There's nowhere to put them. They have these breeding programs to keep them, to keep them from going extinct, but no one wants them reintroduced anywhere. And I've often wondered if for the health and vigor of a wild population of eastern wolves, of eastern New World wolves, if some kind of red wolf, eastern timber wolf would be a suitable um, animal for further south in the Algonquin region. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Sure. Bottom line is we want to let nature take its course. Bottom line, plain and simple, cut and dry. Um, we do know that eastern wolves formerly lived in Maine. We know that from basically just from one specimen killed in the 1860s that was analyzed. That was an eastern wolf. A specimen of wolf killed in New York in the late 19th century was an eastern wolf. The thing about wolves is they move around, and there's no one hard, fast, sharp boundary between a gray wolf and an eastern wolf because each animal can travel 1,000 miles. They can interbreed with each other, and they do. So these boundaries, these lines are very, very blurred between different populations, different wolf species or subspecies. Um, I have no doubt in my mind that the red wolf and the eastern wolf both lived in the lower 48, eastern part of the country, and as both were killed off, the eastern wolf was gone. The red wolf was virtually gone. It was down to just a few animals, I believe, down in Texas. And so they've been breeding red wolves in captivity for decades to try to recover that population. One of the problems with returning red wolves to the wild is the coyotes that are out there, and they continue to interbreed with coyotes, and their DNA gets watered down. So there are certainly problems with that. As far as Maine goes, I suspect that we had both eastern wolves and the larger gray wolf, and the reason I say that is because, as you mentioned at the very very beginning, is that northern Maine deer are not native to northern Maine. Uh, Maine at one time had basically a deer ecosystem, deer-based ecosystem in central and southern Maine, mostly
On
southern
the
Maine.
riparian areas around rivers and on the coast. Yeah.
Yeah, yep, and the northern parts of the state was a wolf moose ecosystem. It was there was moose and caribou, and so I think Maine probably had both animals. Did they interbreed? Possibly. Who knows? Um, so to make a long story short, I think whatever is going to live here, we should just let live here. Now, um, eastern wolves very very seldom take down moose. Northern Maine's got a really healthy moose population, so that's probably where the larger animals are going to survive. And that's what I mean by letting nature take its course is survival of the fittest, and where these animals are going to survive, where they're going to find the food. That's where they're going to find their own
Yeah.
place. So that's kind of how I
Yeah,
feel about
we
that.
have our preferred species, and I agree with you about the moose population to an extent, but they are obviously dealing with a huge tick problem, which is
Right.
is a problem that was brought to us again by um, changing the habitat of our region through through farming and forestry to bring the. We didn't intentionally welcome the white-tailed deer here, but our timber practices and our farming practices made northern Maine more habitable for them, and then they brought all kinds of problems that the caribou couldn't handle, and now the the moose are dealing with, tick problems, which also I think to a large degree is a byproduct of the deer. But I don't hate deer, and it's a hard thing, right? Because as a conservationist, you say, you know, we want do you want to preserve or do you want to restore? And and if you want to restore, how far back are you going? Are you going back to the 1800s as your ideal? Are you going back to the 1600s? Or how far back do you want to? And so what I hear you saying, and I think that this is a more defensible position, what I hear you saying is let nature do nature. And we're not trying to restore some ideal of what things were in the 1600s. We just want to let nature take its course here, and I think that's
Well, the lynx is a perfect example because lynx have come back on their own, and they're recolonizing areas where they can live. They are spreading south, but there's a point where they're not going to be able to go any further south because it's not lynx
Mhm.
habitat, and because you don't have the food supply that they need. They eat largely snowshoe hare, and where are the snowshoe hare? For the most part, they're in the north. The good populations of snowshoe hare in the north, in the coniferous forests, in the mountainous areas. So lynx are a perfect example of letting nature take its course. They were essentially gone. We've stopped killing them because they are protected species, and at some point in time, they'll come off the endangered, threatened species list. There may very well be trapping for lynx again in Maine. It's highly likely that there are already harvestable populations of lynx. So at some point in time, I expect they'll become a game animal again, and this is kind of what happens. The animals will go where they go, and they'll live where they can live, and they won't live where they can't. And is there room for hunting? Absolutely. Do I oppose trapping because I believe it's cruel and unnecessary? Absolutely. That's just my opinion. But is trapping going to continue? Are people going to continue to do it? I expect they will for a long, long time. The reason we have so many lynx right now is because of trapping practices that have been changed. They've been changed because of the incidental take issue. And that's one of the reasons why I oppose trapping. But traps have been forced. They've been forced to be modified to prevent or minimize the trapping of lynx, and it still allows trappers to trap animals, just not lynx. So um, I just think letting nature take its course is really it's a really really simple way of thinking. With the understanding that we'll always be here, and we have to learn to live with nature.
Yeah, I think one point that needs to be made here, that with everything that needs to be said, we haven't gotten around to saying yet, is that Maine has the largest contiguous unprotected forest left in in the east of the Mississippi River. And if the eastern timber wolf is going to reestablish itself anywhere in the Northeast, it needs to be here and in New York. That's really the only places with any with enough space for them to really reestablish themselves. And so, if to borrow the phrase, if not here, then where? And if not now, then
Right.
when? Right? Um, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah. I want to add though that initially, early on in this wolf issue, people were saying, "Well, Maine doesn't have enough room. Maine doesn't have enough habitat. Doesn't have enough prey. Yada yada yada." What the truth of the matter is, the area in northern Maine called the North Maine Woods. It's gated. It's largely privately owned. It's largely commercial forest land. It's 3.5 million acres in size. Yellowstone Park is only 2.2 million acres in size. So the potential here and the size of the forest that we have is extremely large, very very suitable for a healthy population of wolves. And Yellowstone is touted as the gold standard for wolves and wolf recovery. Well, frankly, Maine has more habitat than
Mhm.
Yellowstone. So potential here is
Yeah.
enormous, and the evidence is that wolves are trying to come back. We know of at least a dozen wolves that have been killed south of the St. Lawrence River since 1993. Those animals range in size from a little over 60 pounds to, frankly, over 100 pounds for one animal that was killed in Quebec. So we know they're trying to come back, and we just want to let them
Mhm.
live.
Yeah, and it's kind of a catch-22, especially for people who love wild spaces. Um, we it's going to be funny what I'm about to say, but we actually owe the big companies of the last century a debt of gratitude because they kept the North Maine woods from becoming fragmented and kept it as although it was harvested as a relatively wild space. The danger that we're running into now here in Maine is that with those big timber companies collapsing, and that land is starting to become fragmented into fragmented ownership. We could, this jewel that we have here, that's the North Maine woods, we could end up losing it, just because of the fragmentation that's taking place. And so, uh, in that way, those big timber companies of the 1900s actually gave the 21st century a gift, and and that's something that there's always a balance when you think about these things, right?
We're extremely, extremely fortunate to have what we have because we have something nobody else has frankly, in the entire United States. Um, we could talk for days about the issue of national park, public ownership of land, uh, whatever. I personally believe that we need to have more publicly owned land in Maine to preserve it. That's my own personal belief. That having been said, the point that I haven't made yet is a really, really important one, and that is that wolves and timber harvesting can coexist. They can coexist. They do coexist. They coexist in places like the Northwest U.S. They coexist around the Great Lakes. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Upper Peninsula, Michigan are huge timber producing areas, and they have several thousand wolves. There's absolutely no reason that having a restored wolf population in Maine is going to negatively impact Maine's forest products industry. Period. The end. Case closed. I know that's a concern. That's always been a concern. And the fact of the matter is, it's not a problem anywhere else. And it's not going to be a problem here in
I
Maine.
think this conversation that we've had is going to be really important. There is a stereotypical, the majority of the population, when they think of wolf activists and conservationists, they have this stereotypical, hippie tree hugger, idea in their head of
Hey, I'm an old hippie. Okay, I grew up in the
yeah, yeah.
'60s.
But
I haven't given up
yeah,
yet.
but you have a really good balanced approach, and a well reasoned approach as you discuss these things, and I think that's important for people to hear. Um, I have an idea as we wrap this up. I have an idea of what I think could help, but I want to hear, as the president of the Maine Wolf Coalition, you know, you have made it clear that you are not advocating for forced human wolf reintroduction.
Right.
So what is your goal? Like, what would you like to see? What's the next baby step for you? What would you like to see happen next, as far as where your organization stands?
Sure. Our mission has always been for 30 years now. It's wolf recovery in Maine through research, education, and protection. Um, we believe that if we research needs to be conducted. Nobody's doing it. No universities are doing it. No government agencies are doing it. As far as education goes, the government isn't educating the public about wolves. And as far as protection goes, the government's not protecting them. So, what would we like to see happen? We'd like to see the government do its job. In the meantime, we're doing our best to educate the public. We're doing our best to do some research to try and document that they're here, and if so, where they are and how many there are. And the protection thing, we're shouting from the rooftops that you can't tell the difference between a coyote and a wolf. So something needs to be done to protect wolves. So our group, what we're doing right now is we're continuing to do our DNA work. We are continuing to work to educate the public. We have a Facebook page. We have a website, and what we try to do is gather information and disseminate it, and educate the public, let them know what's really happening, because the government doesn't necessarily want the public to know what's going on or what isn't going
Yeah.
on. Right now, we are trying to work with the state of Maine to include the wolf in their 2025 State Wildlife Action Plan. The 2015 plan, they totally ignored wolves. And the action plan is important because that guides where federal monies are going to go, which species are going to be helped with federal monies. And if the state continues to ignore wolves, then nothing's going to be done on a state level. So we're trying to get them to include wolves in that plan. We're also working on setting up a meeting with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to offer our help, to let them know that we're here. We've been working on this issue for 30 years, and frankly, we believe we know more about Northeast wolves than they do, because they haven't been doing anything about it. So we want to help them to develop their recovery plan for the Northeast. I used to work for the government, and the saying is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Well, we're from the Wolf Coalition and we're here to help. We want to help them to develop the best plan that they possibly can, so that it helps the wolves, helps the people, and it helps these government agencies. So that's kind of where we're going, and uh, onward and upward.
Yeah. The old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I think just from the outside looking in, I think there are a couple things that reasonable minds on both sides of this issue could agree on. And I think, for starters, I think that it should be clear to, I think this is a winnable argument for your organization, even with a vast majority, I mean, an overwhelming majority of the state's population. I think a winnable argument is it is unethical to kill whelping mothers during whelping season. And, that would be a start. That would be a place to start, to say, look, 365 days a year, when there are cubs in the den, is unacceptable. That's just, even for someone like me who believes that there is a place for hunting, even fur bearing predators. I think that's a winnable argument, and I just, wanted to throw that out there. The other thing, and this would require government funds. The other thing would be to, I mean, you can embark your dog. You can do a DNA swab on your dog, and if it's got wolf in it, it'll tell you. Like, these things are super simple to do these days. I see friends of mine who do their sled dogs, embark test them with a little swab, and it comes back, oh my goodness, this is 30% wolf, or hey, look, there's 20% coyote in my dog, that kind of thing. I think a baby step that the state and you guys could do, and you're doing it to the best of your ability now, this would require some federal funds, is simply going to the dens, doing some swabs and some DNA samples. And if you have, and whatever the threshold that's set, let's say it's 80% wolf, if you have an 80% wolf litter, then A, that proves that there's a breeding population in the state, and B, okay, this is off limits for trapping and hunting this region because now we have an established wolf population here. Just for coyotes, there's no trapping, there's no hunting of coyotes in this region because you might inadvertently kill one of these wolves, and just in that little zone, and then do that until they can establish themselves. I, in my mind, I think that those are reasonable things that could be done. That I think a majority of hunters, wouldn't be too opposed to those things. What do you think about that?
Well, I think your ideas are fine, but the word reasonable doesn't play into this, because, as I said earlier, the issue is 99% politics and 1% science. State of Maine government does not care about the science. All they care about is the politics. Politics prevents them from doing anything. So, you know, they defer to the federal government. They're not going to do anything. We have to rely on the federal government now to do its job, to step in. Um, would I like to see Maine Fish and Wildlife do its job? For sure. Do research to actually, manage wildlife populations like they're required to do. That would be nice. That would be really nice. But the politics prevents that from happening. So reasonable. There are a lot of things that are reasonable. They don't happen because of politics. Before I go, I wanted to show you. This is you can see in the bottom here.
And describe for our listeners what you're showing for those who are listening and not watching.
Sure. When we collect scat, we go out. We basically all we do is ride the roads. It costs almost no money for gas, whatever, and we look for poop in the road. And if we see a poop that's fresh enough and big enough, we take a sample, put it in a tube with ethanol, and this can stay preserved indefinitely. So this tube is going to go to DNA researchers, and they're going to extract the DNA from it, and they're going to analyze it, and they're going to find out. They're going to tell us what animal pooped this. It's very, very simple, inexpensive. It's not inexpensive to run the tests. The tests are about $70 per sample per test. But it's fun to go out, ride the roads, and look for poop, pick some up, and essentially anybody can do it. And we're always looking for help.
And on
We suggest go
and
ahead.
on that note, how do people reach out to you? How do they connect with you?
Sure. Through our website, www.mainewolfcoalition.org. You can reach us there. And also on our Facebook page, just Google Maine Wolf Coalition Facebook, and that'll take you right to our Facebook page. The website is under reconstruction right now, but it does have a link if folks are so inclined to contribute. We're 501c3, so any contributions you make are tax deductible. And right now, all the money that we're collecting is going to pay for DNA analysis of our scat. Presently, we have about $10,000 in the bank. Much of that's going to be sent to the researchers so that they can start their analyses. But frankly, this is a citizen science project. That's a fairly new term, where citizens are taking the
Where
lead.
science is going back to its roots, because that's how science started, right?
The people. We don't have, frankly, we don't have. Our motive is to help wolves. We don't have a political bias in terms of, we're going to do this, we're not going to do that for reasons of politics. We're going to do what needs to be done to our best of our ability to help wolves. That's our goal, plain and simple. So yeah, citizen science. There are so many examples of citizen science projects across the country where people are stepping in places where the government just doesn't have the resources. So this is one of the things we're doing. I wanted to, if I can, I could just show you a little tray. This is just a few of our samples. We'll be shipping a bunch of these to the researchers.
And for those who can't see
But
that, I'm looking at about what I'm guessing 50 to 60 vials in a tray.
yeah, and we collect for each sample, poop sample, we collect two, sample and a duplicate. And the duplicate's important because sometimes they get lost, or sometimes we want to, recheck a sample. But so this is what we have. I've got in my little office here, I've got several hundred of these tubes with poop in them, and we send them off as we can, and analyze them, do the DNA, and we'll see what the results are. It's a simple matter of, frankly, just telling the truth. And the results are what they are. We're not going to say that, we're going to find this, we're going to find that, and then make the results fit what our predetermined conclusions are. We're either going to find wolves, or we aren't going to find wolves. If we find wolves, great, we'll go from there. If we don't find any, guess what? We're going to keep looking. So because we do believe they're here, we found at least one. We have some fantastic photos and video of animals that look just like wolves. So, we're excited, and
And I know you get a lot of
we,
flack for
we know.
I know
Go
you get
ahead.
a lot of flack for what you just said. So, as someone who has spent 4 years of his life studying uh, our coyotes and how they relate to the eastern timber wolf and the western coyote, I'm for what it's worth. I give you my complete agreement. Um, it some more than others, but our coy wolf population looks very eastern timber wolf. I agree with you 100%.
And some of these animals certainly look more wolf-like than others. I recently talked with a person in Ontario, and what she said, frankly, was that some of these wolves present more like coyotes than wolves. So an animal can look coyote-like, have the narrow snout, but actually have more wolf DNA in it than coyote DNA. So when I say it's impossible to distinguish, that's what I mean. But we do have quite a number of very, very wolf-like animals in Maine, and frankly, the state government can no longer deny that these animals exist. I will tell you that they say the double standard that Maine Fish and Wildlife has is that the only way you can tell if an animal is a wolf is through its DNA. Okay, that's what they say. Well, we sent them a photograph of an animal that looked like a wolf, and they immediately said it was a
Mhm.
coyote. So that's the double standard. They can say an animal is a wolf only by its DNA, but they can tell that an animal is a coyote just by looking at a
Right.
photograph. So that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle, and for
Hmm. Yeah, I've been climbing that mountain for 30 years, and
I,
I'm still going.
and while we don't agree on everything, I do agree that this is a worthwhile endeavor, and that's why I wanted to give you whatever platform that I have. I think that us losing power yesterday was a bit fortuitous because what was going to be a 10-minute conclusion turned into another episode. So I think what we're going to do here is simply make this a two-part podcast, and
I hope so. I don't want people to
now
sleep.
we'll send out part
You know,
one this weekend and give people a few days to chew on it, and then we'll give them part two. I want to thank you for your time.
I can't go yet. I got to tell you
Okay,
one
go
more
for it.
thing. My father was in the Air Force in the early 1950s, and he brought back a pair of wolf mittens, and I have those wolf mittens still. So when you talk about the importance of natural fur and the warmth of natural fur, I've got a pair of wolf mittens, and I'm nobody else knows this. So this is just between you and me. But I have a pair of wolf
That's
mittens.
awesome. Yeah, and when I went to Alaska and I started talking about 30, 40 below zero temps, um, everyone I talked to, and I don't mean 30 to 40 below zero temps alone, but I mean 30 to 40 below zero 4 days at a time. When you're
Oh yeah.
running a long distance race, And they said, if you don't have beaver mitts on your hands, you will be in trouble. So, and that's why I say what I say. I think there's a place for it. I just really appreciate you taking this time. And I think that people are going to be pleasantly surprised to hear your reasonable approach, to hear, your organization's perspective on this, actually not wanting to reintroduce wolves artificially was news to me
That's
in this conversation.
that's the
So,
last that's the last thing we want, and
I
we
think that's going to
never
be, I
support
think
that.
that's going to be a surprise to the general population as well that
Mhm.
listens to this. So I want to thank you for your reasonable approach. I want to thank you for taking this time with us. It's been a little bit of an effort for the two of us to sync our schedules, but we've managed to pull it off twice now. And I'm really looking forward to getting this out there, and the feverish conversations that are no doubt going to follow from both camps.